We'll be at ease for just a moment. Are there matters that we need to take up before we bring jurors? All right, very well. Let's bring jurors. Mr. Hahn, if you resume your seat, sir. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you had a good lunch recess. Mr. Fawcett, further questions for this witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. Can the state republish State's Exhibit 112, the calendar?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hahn, before the lunch recess, I think we were discussing the morning of Friday, April the 12th. The defendant, Mr. Broyhill, made contact with you. He was at the beach. He's now, we're rescheduling his hospital visit to Duke, and the Wallace meeting has been pushed back till Monday the 15th. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You and Jamie are not leaving for the beach Sunday the 14th now, right?
No, we decided to leave the next day.
Was the defendant aware that you were intending to leave for the beach that Sunday?
He knew, yes.
You also mentioned about Mr. Broyhill having to maybe find a new place to live. He was living at Glasscock with his roommate Donna, is that right?
I think
Tell us-
he had mentioned to us that she was in the process of perhaps selling her house or looking to sell her house, so he was going to need a new place to live.
And you were speaking about someone that was maybe offering to help him with his living arrangements?
Yes, that was Maureen Wertheim.
All right, and what was the connection there with Maureen, and what as far as her willing to assist him?
She was the mother of a mutual friend, and she in turn had become good friends with the defendant.
Okay. And if you know, was there some discussions about her helping the defendant with, ultimately when he told her about the cancer?
Yes, I believe she had walked him through the way it was relayed to us from him, and was that she had walked him through, like, here's the way chemo works, etc. But he was with her the night. But I think he may have seen her that Wednesday night before we were supposed to go to the doctor on that Thursday of the 11th.
Okay.
I think.
What else goes on that weekend? Friday the 12th, Saturday the 13th, into Sunday the 14th, as far as you and your wife, and any contact or plans with Jonathan Broyhill?
We would. We went about a fairly normal weekend because we weren't leaving till now Monday. Saturday night I had work, and so she and a friend spent the evening together. But otherwise, it was just a normal weekend. We checked in with the defendant a couple of times just to see how he was, and just to reiterate that we'd love for him to, or to reiterate that he needed to be back Sunday evening, which he said he would be.
Okay. Tell us about Sunday, any contact you're having with Jonathan Broyhill in the next time you see him, starting here Sunday the 14th of April.
We had tentatively discussed dinner plans with friends and asked him if he would like to join those plans or if he would rather just come directly to the house. And he said he didn't want to join those friends for dinner. So we were home, and then eventually he would come home. We did anniversary shopping for each other that day and bought some other things for the beach.
Okay. When is the first time you see Jonathan Broyhill on Sunday the 14th?
It was that night. He came home to our house sometime between 7:30, 8:30.
Okay. And tell us about when you first see him after he's now been gone for these days after being fired from LabCorp.
He just expressed that he was feeling a little bit better about things now that he'd had the weekend at the beach and had a chance to think. And so that was our discussion.
What types of things did he share with you about what he'd been doing for the last several days at the beach?
He just said that he had been looking out at the ocean, thinking, spending time just sort of with himself and reflecting on things, given his what he presumed was going to be a cancer diagnosis.
Okay. What did he bring over, if anything, to your house that Sunday evening when he arrived between 7:30-ish, 8:30-ish?
I know he had his laptop and a few other things because he and Jamie sat down stairs and started working on the FEC report that they were going to John Wallace about the next day.
Okay. Where were you when they were working on the FEC report?
Initially, I was downstairs, and then I went upstairs to my office and started working myself just to work through a few things.
Okay. What else happens that Sunday while you're? How's the night end? What goes on?
They were working through the FEC report, and I can't remember why. I looked at the committee website on the FEC, I think just to see maybe when it was due or something. I don't know. Jamie and I were having a conversation on IM, and I saw, or I can't remember if I saw or if she brought it to my attention via instant message that there was a letter about a late report or a report that had not been filed that was public. Mr. Broyhill, or defendant or whatever, told her that he had filed it. She was relaying this to me by instant message, that he had filed it and that he, had proof of that, and he would send her, I think, a fax notification that the report had been filed, or at least that there had been something transmitted to the FEC. But she felt, I mean, that resolved itself, and then they resolved the draft report that night, and then she and I went to bed. I went to sleep.
Did the defendant stay the night with you that night?
He did, because they had to, their John Wallace meeting was, I think, at 9 a.m. It was early the next morning. And then we were supposed to, he had scheduled his appointment at Duke, or his supposed appointment at Duke, for following the John Wallace meeting.
Okay. Was the defendant now going to go with Jamie to the John Wallace meeting Monday morning, the 15th?
He was.
Your understanding?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about, well, if you know, who all went to bed at what time that Sunday night, the 14th?
Jamie and I left him downstairs. He was watching TV since he was going to stay the night, and we went upstairs and went to sleep. I mean, I think we probably got into bed around 10:30, something like that, but I don't think we fell asleep right away. We were, reading and probably had the TV on and so on and so forth.
As far as you know, in the mornings when you next see the defendant?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Tell us about that Monday morning, April 15th, and as in much detail as you're aware. Take us through that day, please.
I was going to take our car, one of our cars, to get serviced, just because we were going to drive to the beach while Jamie and the defendant went to the John Wallace meeting. So I left and went and had the car serviced, and then I went and picked up breakfast for sort of an array for all three of us, just so they would all have something to eat if they wanted it. They went to the John Wallace meeting, or at least
They drive to the John Wallace?
they did. They did. I was there. I got back a little bit after they did. Gave them the biscuits and donuts if they wanted. Sorry, got back home. I arrived home. And then we all went to Duke Cancer Hospital together.
What time was the appointment Monday at Duke Hospital?
I can't recall. I mean, I know that they had budgeted at least 30 minutes, but maybe up to an hour for the John Wallace meeting. So I want to say it was maybe 10:30 or 11.
Okay. Do you remember any discussions?
But it could have been a little later.
Do you remember any discussions after the John Wallace meeting, having breakfast or on the way to Duke, about the John Wallace meeting or not?
Not that I can recall. I mean, if anything, I probably said, "How was it?" But there was no. I mean, it seemed to be perfunctory, like just run of the mill.
How about conversations? Who drove to the Duke Hospital?
I believe I did.
Okay. How about conversations on the way to Duke Hospital about anything between you three?
It was just normal conversation. We're going to the beach. This is what Jamie and I plan on doing. How are you feeling given this upcoming appointment? Just sort of run-of-the-mill conversation. Nothing that I can remember that stands out.
Okay. Where did you go specifically about this Duke Hospital?
We pulled up to Duke Cancer, and we were running like right on the edge of his appointment time, or his supposed appointment time. And so we asked him, or I suggested that he get out while we took care of parking the car. So he hopped out, and I can't remember if Jamie hopped out or not. But either way, I decided to valet the car because we had a couple of dollars cash. And I came in, Jamie and I came in, walked in to the lobby. John was standing across the lobby, like to the far left, talking to a nurse, or what I presumed was a nurse, or to a receptionist at a desk. He came over to us and told us that that they needed to take him back right then for tests, and that they would come get us if he needed us. So we then went and sat in the lobby, and he went back through double doors behind the receptionist desk.
Okay. And you saw this?
I did, yes, sir.
What did you and Jamie do at this point?
We sat in the lobby for, I don't know, some length of time. I mean, it was after maybe an hour, I decided to get up and go just for a walk outside, just to get some fresh air. Jamie remained inside. I came back in. It still wasn't, he still wasn't back. It probably had been at that point an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. I mean, it seemed like a very long period of time. We were sitting downstairs or seated, and then we saw him coming down the steps. There were, like, if you walked into the reception area or what have you, the lobby, there's steps that go down right in front of the double doors as you come in. And he was coming down the steps. We rushed over, and he said, they just rushed him into the doctor visit. And he told us he did indeed have pancreatic cancer, but the doctors were hopeful. And we waited on our car. Along that time, he suggested that he had to come back for a scope, I guess for further tests and a couple other things next, the 23rd, so almost a week and a day. And so we said, yeah, of course we'll be there for you. And then we went to lunch. At lunch, we tried to change the subject some. He talked a little bit about the doctor was presuming that he was going to be doing a Whipple procedure, or that would be his treatment. A Whipple procedure. I'm not a cancer doctor, but my understanding was it was something where they removed the tumor and then they fused things back together. I mean, he was describing it as a fairly advanced procedure. Jamie would Google it just to sort of find out more information and would relay that, yeah, it was pretty advanced, state of the art. But he seemed relatively optimistic coming out of that meeting, just that, and told us that the doctors themselves seemed relatively optimistic coming out of that meeting.
And this is at lunch. Where did you have lunch?
We had lunch at a restaurant in Durham, Nosh,
Right.
near the hospital.
And he told you, mentioned the word needed to have a scope. Do you
He said he had
tell you what that meant?
just that he had to have a scope and some further tests done the following week, and and he told us he had yet to tell his parents, but I think he told us that he was going to call them. I know he told us at some point that week that he's going to call them and have them come down to join him that Tuesday, the 23rd.
For the procedure back at Duke?
Yes, sir.
You took a walk?
Yeah, I walked around Duke Gardens for a little bit just to pass the time while waiting on him to get out of his procedure.
After lunch, you three are still together in Durham. What do you do now?
We went to lunch at Nosh and then drove home, and Jamie and I put our bags in the car and sort of took off for the beach right away.
Leaving, the defendant was where when you left for the beach?
He said he was going to go lay down because he hadn't slept much the night before, so he went to our guest bedroom. He was going to stay with our dogs for a few days while we were going to the beach.
Headed out of town, tell us about any phone conversation your wife had.
We were at Costco pumping gas, or I was pumping gas, and Jamie was inside on the phone. I believe she got a note or a text, maybe it was a phone call from someone with Miller's office saying that this bill collector was once again reaching out, and who knows what it was about, but to call him back. And so she called him back, and I just overheard her while I was pumping gas. He informed her, because she relayed it to me, that the check had bounced. And she got off the phone, and we had a discussion that, how could that be? She had told, I said, there's money in the accounts, right? And she said, yes, they had just finished the draft report, so I think it said there was $60,000, and she was adamant that had to have been there. And so we just decided that it must be some mistake on the bill collector's end, and so we drove on to the beach.
You've previous occasion have listened to those phone calls, have you not?
I have.
And that approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Since it's over 14, it's already in the evidence, but that CD, did you listen to that?
I did.
Time?
Yes,
And
sir.
how do you know that?
I've initialed it and dated it.
Female voice identified herself as Jamie,
That is.
and do you hear one phone conversation on there with the defendant?
I did.
Speaking also?
Yes, sir.
So, do you recall if your wife, after this phone conversation with the bill collector, and you're at Costco, do you recall her talking about trying to access or being unable to online banking for the Brad Miller account?
I posed a question to her about, online checking. Could she get on there and, see if the check had run or if if there was something amiss? And she said that she didn't have the login information.
You head to the beach?
We did. Yes, sir.
Tell us about the beach. Any conversations or work matters that may have came up before your friends, including at the end of the week?
For the most part, we tried to just enjoy our anniversary. She had to do a little bit of work for the Hope Center at Poland, which is a foster youth organization that she was on the board of and that she was helping out with. So she had to help them prep like an online fundraising campaign. So she did some work on that, and I actually helped her a little bit because it was something more familiar to my expertise. The only other thing that came up was, I think it was that Tuesday, well, I think it was Wednesday, she got an email from John Wallace regarding the FEC report not being filed, which
You already testified about it?
I have, and which John had sent her the information saying a fax notification saying, yes, it has been filed. So she didn't seem to think too much of it. She mostly just wanted to reach out to him to make sure that he would follow up with John Wallace and send him. He was supposed to have called the FEC, clarified that it was their error, if it in fact was their error, and then send that information to John Wallace.
Okay. No other work discussions that you, as
No.
far as what we're talking
No,
about?
not really, no.
Friends, well, tell me about conversations or communications or conversations that you have personally with the defendant, Jonathan Broyhill, while you're at the beach before he arrives.
Periodically, I would just check in to see how he was doing, physically and emotionally. We did have a brief text conversation about the fact that, I think it was text, that he was either pre-diabetic or was diabetic, which was, as he put it, or at least as we understood it, sort of a symptom associated with pancreatic cancer, that it could cause your sugar levels to rise. So I know he had a series of doctor's appointments that week, so we would just check in with him periodically. At one point, Jamie did ask me to because she wasn't hearing from him regarding the FEC stuff that John Wallace emailed about. She asked me to also text him and say, "Hey, could you get back to Jamie?" So I did.
Okay. He was telling you, communicating to you in one form or fashion, that he had some other doctor's appointments that week at the beach while you're at the beach.
I believe he claimed that I believe he said that he had 2 doctor's appointments that week.
Um,
Because I know he said that he had one on Friday, so he and the friend that were riding down with him were going to leave later to come to the beach because of that doctor's appointment.
What time, about what time Friday does the defendant get to the beach?
He was riding with a mutual friend, and they arrived early evening, late afternoon, early evening.
Who was your friend?
Billy Kirk.
Okay. And your understanding from the defendant's conversations or communications was that they left a little later because he had a doctor's appointment on Friday the 19th?
Yes, he had to take one of our. We had asked him to, and he agreed to take one of our dogs to the vet to be operated on. She was being neutered or whatever. And then he had a doctor's appointment, so he said he had to leave in the early afternoon after the doctor's appointment.
Who collectively came to the beach that weekend?
It was him, the defendant. It was Billy Kirk, Nick Richards, who's a longtime friend, Perry Tarasacano. I think his girlfriend Versha came. Billy, who drove down with him, who I may have already mentioned, and then it was Jamie and I.
And where did y'all stay?
We stayed at a friend's beach house in Emerald Isle.
All right. How was the weekend once the defendant got there and stayed over the weekend? Tell us all about what you recall, interactions with the defendant, how things.
Friday night.
Normal. Just tell us about the weekend.
Friday night, Jamie had made dinner for everyone, and we all started having drinks, and we took a walk on the beach. The house is on the point of Emerald Isle, so we walked down to the point. And we just had a great time. Everyone collectively as a group, drinking, eating, etc.
During the days, what type of activities did y'all do? Specifically, if the defendant was included or not.
He was. I mean, Saturday was kind of drizzly and cold, so we were inside a lot. We did drive to the sanitary in whatever city it's in, but north of Emerald Isle, to have lunch as a group collectively. We came back. I think we stopped by like a Wings or one of those sort of goofy beach stores and bought some people bought some towels or mementos or whatever. Came home. We ended up going back out and going to play putt-putt that night, which he was included in, and it was a group of us. I think everyone went, or almost everyone went. We played putt-putt, and then we got groceries to go with dinner. Oh, and David Blair was down there. Sorry, my friend David Blair as well. I forgot to mention him.
Full house.
Yeah, we had a full house. And so David had made a lasagna, and so we were going to get some things to go along with that. So we did, and we went home, made a lasagna, and again, everyone stayed up playing cards and joking around.
Okay. Any significant conversations you had with the defendant that Saturday?
Not on Saturday, no. I mean, it was just a normal, I think he gave me a birthday card, Friday or Saturday one. But it was mostly group activities, or Jamie and I off at night.
Sunday, the 21st. Tell us about that day at the beach.
It was a more beautiful day. It was sunny and warm, much warmer. We got up. Jamie went on a run. I didn't. I didn't feel like it. I sat out on the deck and watched her go on a run. The only really memorable thing we went to lunch, came back. John had walked out on the beach. I was sitting by himself, staring out the ocean. So I walked out and asked him if he wanted to walk up and down the beach, and we did. And we had a conversation. I just asked him, how are you really doing? How are you feeling? And he just shared that, he felt like the next few months were going to be rough, but that he would come out on the other side okay. That he really appreciated how much we were supporting him, and that things would work out. And he seemed relatively at peace, because again, we were worried about him knowing this procedure was coming up at Duke, and knowing that or assuming that he had pancreatic cancer and MS. But he seemed relatively at peace when we were out walking.
Sunday afternoon and evenings. Tell us about leaving.
We ultimately left, and we all had just sort of sat around and talked, because it had been a great weekend with everyone down there, and a great week for Jamie and I. So we decided that we invited everyone to come to the house to grill out when we got back, just sort of so we could have a little more time together. So we drove back. Jamie and I had to stop off and pick up our puppy, Rosie, from the vet, and we did that. And I had to run to Whole Foods to get some supplies for dinner. But anyways, long story short, everyone gathered at the house. Billy walked in and said that John wasn't going to stay because he was tired and wanted to get home. So I walked out and saw him getting ready to pull off. I waved him down. I said, "You doing okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I just really need to rest. I'm just exhausted." And I said, "Yeah, okay, well, have a good night." And he drove off. We had the cookout, and then I went to bed. I watched a movie with my friend Nick was staying over that night before he drove back to Lenore the next day. So Jamie went to bed maybe 10 or 10:30, and I watched a movie with Nick until maybe 11:30, and then I went upstairs and went to sleep.
So the defendant didn't join for the cookout at your house Sunday evening?
He did not, no.
Common complaint, exhausted, tired. Was that sort of a common theme with his MS and other ailments?
It did come up, but it wasn't like frequent. It wasn't overly frequent. This was just, the end of a long weekend, and he had stayed up late the night before with some of the folks that were there.
Monday, the 22nd. Mr. Holland, if you would, as best you can, just take us through that day, please.
I woke up. It was a relatively normal day. I think our house was sort of unusually cold because the heat wasn't quite working. And it was a cool night. And so Jamie and I both sort of bundled up. We woke up. I got dressed and went to work. Jamie had a couple of business development meetings and some other meetings outside the house. There had been some discussion with a mutual friend of who knew John really well and who wanted to sort of take his mind off the procedure the next day, that maybe we could go for a hike after work. So I didn't pack any gym clothes. I just went off to work. And fairly normal day. Jamie would fill me in periodically on how our meetings were going. She had reached an agreement, I think, with Passage Home, which is a community development corporation in Southeast Raleigh, to help them with some fundraising and some work in Southeast Raleigh. And then she had went and met with Anita Brown Graham at the Institute for Emerging Issues. And she was very excited about that meeting. I'd helped set that up, and she was very thrilled. But it was just a normal day. We had a brief conversation. I said, are we going on a hike? And she said she hadn't heard from Crystal, who was the mutual friend, or from John. I said, okay, well, are we working out together? Or do you want me to wait on you? / are you going to wait on me, or should we work out separately? And she said that John was coming over to sort of finalize the bank stuff for the Miller campaign, and she didn't know how long that would take. And so I just told her I would probably be home a little later on, like 5:30 or 6, and because I was going to try to get more work done.
Okay. In reality, what time did you come home?
I ended up being exhausted because it was the first full day back after a week away. And so I left was after 4:30, but well before 5, I left and drove home from work. So I came home. Jamie was there, of course, and John's car was parked in the drive or in the street. So I pulled in when I was on the phone with a friend who had called me about my birthday. I think that just passed, and I walked in the house.
Who were you talking to?
A guy named Fran.
Okay. About what time is this when you arrive home? It sounds like early from work.
Yeah, I arrived home early. It was before 5 o'clock. I'm not sure exactly when.
All right. Tell us about how you go into the house and tell us what's going on.
I walked in our front door through the entryway, and I was on the phone, and I had some packages on the. We had like a. I don't know how to describe it. Like a little. Not a cabinet, but a chest, like a cedar chest inside the door. So there were some packages on the cedar chest. So I started sort of flipping through those, and I was on the phone. I hung up. I saw John was walking through the kitchen. So I went over, gave him a hug, asked him how he's doing. He said, "Yeah, I'm doing okay." I asked him, "Are you going to stay with us tonight?" You know, because his procedure was, I think, scheduled for 7:30, and he said he thought so. He said he had his bags, he had his clothes packed with him in case he did, and I just relayed to him that I had to stay in Durham for work after the appointment, so Jamie and I were going to drive separately, and I said, you can ride with me there, and then Jamie can drive you back, or your parents can drive you back, because he said his parents were still planning on meeting him there. And it was just a normal conversation. I said, I'm going to go upstairs and change and go on a run or go to the gym one, and I went upstairs.
All right. You told the defendant you were getting ready to go upstairs to change and get ready to leave to go on a run.
I did, yes.
Did you tell where was your wife at this time?
She was in her home office, and so there were two sort of, I guess, French doors, the doors that sort of slide up and slide down. She was behind those doors. She'd keep them shut to keep our young puppy from like running through the house chewing up stuff. So she was behind those doors in her home office, and I think she was on the phone at the time when I walked in, and she was at least checking voicemail, and she was seated behind her computer.
Okay. Anything, observations about your conversation with Jonathan Broyhill there before you go upstairs?
No, sir, it seemed normal.
Seemed normal?
Yeah, it was normal.
You go upstairs?
Yes, sir.
All right, take us through this as best you can, please.
I went upstairs and changed out of my work clothes, pulled on basketball shorts. I think I left on my white undershirt, and then I went to use the restroom. I was using the restroom, and I heard Jamie scream, and I yelled out, "What?" And I turned to leave the restroom, and I yelled, "What?" again. And she called my name. She screamed "Nation," but she also screamed "John." My immediate assumption was that something had happened with him. The way she was screaming his name, it just sounded like it just sounded like something, like he had passed out or something. So I started proceeding through the bedroom as quickly as I could, threw open the door. She was still alternating her names, screaming mine as if sort of come, screaming his in a different way. I was halfway down the stairs, and I was yelling "What?" as I ran, or "What's happening?" Or I was halfway down the stairs, and she screamed out, "He's trying to kill me." I proceeded down the stairs, and I sort of rounded the corner of the stairs. They were right here. I sort of rounded the corner, and my eyes immediately went. There was blood on the floor, and I could see Jamie's legs sticking out from sort of behind. Like, here's the door. I could see her legs sort of and lower torso poking out from there. My eyes immediately went to that, and then I looked up, and John was standing over her with a knife, He immediately turned and proceeded towards me.
As you're seeing this, are you headed towards the kitchen?
I began to head towards the kitchen, yes. I mean, I was heading towards the kitchen the whole time.
Continue, please.
I screamed out, "What the fuck are you doing?" Sorry. And he came towards me. He had the knife up, or he pulled the knife up, and then he sliced it towards me. And my immediate reaction, as best I can remember, was to try to grab the blade, or to grab towards it because it was coming towards me. And we immediately started sort of wrestling. I was trying to get the blade from him. At the same time, I was hitting him sort of open face in the palm, with the palm of my hand, screaming at him, "What are you doing?" And no response. I was also screaming at Jamie to get out of the house.
As you're going to grab the knife initially, you indicated to us, is that with your left hand?
Yes, it was.
And you're trying to hit the defendant with your
I was striking him sort of with an open palm with the right hand.
the right hand. Okay. Jamie's on the floor in what room?
She was laying in the sort of in between the kitchen and the living room.
Okay. You're yelling at her to get up. Okay. Tell us as you're still fighting. The defendant.
I was trying to get the knife from him, and I was trying to, I wanted to get to her. I was screaming for her to leave. She got up. We're wrestling us, and I could hear the side door swing open. I'm still fighting him, trying to keep him from hurting me. I didn't even realize my hands had been cut at the time. I ultimately, it's very hard to piece together all of it, except that I was trying desperately to get the knife from him. I just know that I created separation. I think I shoved him with my arm, but either way, I immediately turned to run and ran through the dining room. And as I ran, I saw him going down the hallway. I ran through the house and got out the side door.
Where'd you go?
I started looking for Jamie.
Couldn't see her?
No, I couldn't see her at the time. I don't remember distinctly even how I proceeded out of the house, except I went out the side door and went, I think, down the driveway, screaming for help. The next time I have a very clear memory of her, I was screaming at someone to call 911, and there was a person walking towards me. And I turned back to her, and she was clutching her side, and she had like a big wound in her side, or what looked like a big wound. Eventually, I just don't. It was just chaotic. She sat down or collapsed or something in the yard of the Harrells, and my next clear memory is really just talking to her.
Tell us about that, please.
We who I would come to find out was Julie. I didn't know at the time. At least one of the neighbors was tending to her. One side, I was on the other side. And I just remember telling her that I loved her. We said it back and forth. Promising her that we would have a lot more anniversaries. I told her we'd go back to the beach as soon as she was better. And we just had that kind of conversation. I asked her at one point, I said, I remember asking something to the effect of, "Why did you do this?" Or what happened? And because I knew they were going to look at bank books. And I said, "Did he take Brad's money, or what happened?" And she didn't really respond to that. At that point, who I found out later was Bill Harrell, I think, walked me away and was tending to my hands, which is when I first realized that my hands had been damaged.
Someone give you a towel or something there?
Before EMS would... I think so. And my last real clear memory from just standing there was having my towel bandaged and then watching the EMS take Jamie away. She'd been complaining about her breathing when I was over there, and I thought she was going to have an asthma attack because she had really bad asthma. So my assumption was that she was having an asthma attack, or that was impacting her breathing. So I remember telling Julie or someone, she has asthma, she has asthma, she has asthma. And that was, for whatever reason, was a real concern to me. That was sticking with me.
Let me, Mr. Hahn, when you went upstairs to go to the bathroom, were you on a computer, some type of a computer device?
I was on my iPad for a moment.
How long, when you went upstairs, did you say you closed your master bedroom door?
I think I shut the bedroom door because we tried to keep the cats out. And I'd taken on, it was long enough to change and then go and start using the restroom.
Can you give us some sense of time as you head up the steps until the first time you hear your wife screaming? Can you give us a sense of time, how long that took?
Maybe 5 minutes,
Okay.
10. I mean, it wasn't very long.
There, in evidence, there appears to be a photo of the master bedroom, maybe some jeans on the bed, and some loafers.
I'd changed.
Those are your.
Yes, sir.
Once you heard Jamie screaming the first time, how long before you got to maybe the bottom of the steps and turned to see what was going on?
It wasn't very long. Before I started moving downstairs, I yelled, "What?" And then I started moving because she was still screaming. But it couldn't have taken me very long to get downstairs because at one point, eventually I started running.
When you got to the bottom of the steps and turned, can you tell us, I'll show you a photo or two in a moment, can you tell us where the defendant, when he looks at you, he comes at you? Is that your testimony? Can you give us a little more detail?
He was standing at the end of the hallway, sort of. If you walk, there was a door, or like a door frame, like heading into the kitchen, dining room, living room area. And then right beside that was Jamie's home office, or Sky Blue's office. He was standing just sort of right past that door, and she was laying right past that door.
They're both in the kitchen?
They were.
Okay. How once the defendant turned, where was the knife? And tell us where he came to you at.
It was in his hand. He proceeded down the hallway. I guess we both did. And he gradually raised it as he got closer to me.
Did he ever slash, swing, or hit with
He
the
swung.
knife?
I don't know if that's a word. He swung towards me. He was bringing the knife down when I reached and grabbed the blade.
At you?
He was, yes.
How long do you think you did your hand stay on the knife from that point forward? Did he able to stab at you, whatever the right
He
word is?
pulled the knife away, I think, once or twice. But we were in very close quarters, and I tried my best to sort of keep my hand on the blade or around the blade because I was trying to pull it from him.
I approached the witness, Your Honor.
Yes.
This is State's Exhibit 39 and State's Exhibit 40. Mr. Hahn. Do you see, first off, it appears to be some type of baby.
That'd be a baby gate that we had to keep the dogs in the kitchen and the living room.
Okay. Normally, do you recall where the baby gate was?
Typically, it would be at the end of the hallway, sort of blocking the living room and kitchen from the hallway.
Do you remember, was it up that afternoon, or where it was located? In the middle of the floor?
It was up. I'm pretty sure it was up when I know it was up when I arrived home because when I hugged the defendant before I went upstairs, I leaned over the gate.
Would you be able to, on either of these pictures, indicate where defendant came at you with the knife and you encountered him as you've already testified? Maybe states Exhibit 40 with an X, if it's depicted in that picture.
It was around the closet door in that area.
You got past
I turned past the cedar chest
Cedar
when
chest.
we ended up meeting. Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you see, if we could put States Exhibit 40 up at this time? Now, I know you've marked the actual physical copy of States Exhibit 40. Can you indicate state to the jury on the TV where you marked the X and where?
We met right in this area, sort of right in front of the closet before.
Did you ever get into the kitchen yourself?
I didn't know.
Okay.
Not that.
The let me show you what's marked States Exhibit 113 for identification purposes. Do you recognize
The layout.
it's the layout of the first floor of your house?
It is.
Would States Exhibit 113 help illustrate where various people were during this?
It would.
Your Honor, the state would offer an evidence States Exhibit 113 for illustrative purposes.
Okay.
All right, it's allowed for illustrative purposes.
Could you, if you would, indicate the vantage point you saw of your wife as she's on the floor?
Oh, where was she?
And you turned from the staircase, what you're observing. All right, and you've marked a J there. Could you also mark maybe where her head and her legs were positioned from your point?
I couldn't see her head. I could only see her lower torso. So
So was her head more so in the living room area?
yeah, I could only see her lower torso or in her
Okay.
feet,
Gotcha.
or yeah, if that's the right word.
Did you ever see how your wife left out? I know you mentioned the side door. Did you see her as you're wrestling with the
We were locked in close quarters. I sort of saw out of the corner of my eye her motion, but she certainly didn't come by us, and the only other exit point would have been the back deck or the side door.
Could you mark, using the red pen on States Exhibit 113, please, on how you exited out the house? Do you recall if there was another baby gate in the dining room?
There would have been typically, yes.
Do you recall anything about that baby gate?
I don't. I don't know if I leapt over it. If I just ran through it, I don't know.
Could you publish now States Exhibit 113? And I know you've marked this exhibit hard copy, but if you could just trace where you've indicated your wife was when you turned the corner.
Yes, sir, as needed.
When you turn the corner at the staircase, when you see your wife, and then if you could also indicate how you fled the house.
This is our front door. These are the stairs. Jamie, I could see her, at least her legs and her feet were right around in this area because I could see them down the hallway. We ended up intersecting, he and I, here, this area. When I created separation, I ran through the dining room as quickly as I could and ran this way.
What's your why did you not go out the front door?
The only thing I could think is it just was. It seemed like I think I was afraid he was going to stab me in the back. To be honest with you, I mean, I was just trying to get away from him as quickly as I could. It's a swinging door. There's a glass door there that I would have had to open and push out of, and we were right in this entryway at that point. So as soon as I created separation, I ran out as quickly as I could the other way.
Once you got outside the house, you didn't see your wife.
Not at first, no.
Where did you first see Jamie?
She was proceeding sort of towards me, like at an angle, because I believe I'd ran out in the street and I was going towards the main road calling for help. She was proceeding towards me at an angle, and that was when I noticed her holding her side.
You asked Jamie about Brad's money, whatever your testimony was. What
Just in the
made
while,
you go say that?
to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I knew that I knew they were looking at the bank books, and I knew that he would be handing over a lot of stuff to her that he had in his custody. But I mean, it was literally like a leap of logic. There was no, yeah.
Was there some certain small amount of money that was some ongoing issue about that Jamie Lee spoke with you about?
Yeah, in the months or weeks leading up to it, there was some discrepancy in the range of $700 or $800 and what was in the state accounts that she couldn't quite figure out where that $700 or $800 had come from or why it was less, $700 or $800 less. But that was the only real discussion about money other than the Brad loan being slow to be repaid.
There was no concerted effort or conversation with your wife where she told you she was going to have a discussion with the defendant that afternoon about any type of suspicion of money being...
No, I mean, not. The only thing she told me was that they were going to be going over the bank books, and he'd be walking her through the bank statements, giving her the bank books, giving her the post office key, whatever stuff he had left over.
You're taken to the hospital in an ambulance?
Was.
Okay. Tell us about at the hospital what occurs.
The whole way there, I was asking EMS, do you know anything about my wife? Do you know anything about my wife? Do you know anything about my wife? I remember a call coming in over the walkie-talkie on the EMS that sounded like very serious. And I just remember looking at the EMS lady and saying, was that about my wife? And she said no, but I saw her click the walkie-talkie off, or at least turn the volume down. And so they wheeled me in, and one of the first people I saw was the chaplain. And she came up and she said, I can't remember her name. She introduced herself. She said, "I'm the chaplain here." And I just remember completely falling apart because my assumption was if the chaplain was coming to speak to me, it wasn't a good thing. But she calmed me down and just was telling me that, she was in good hands, that Jamie was in good hands, and that, that they were going to do their best.
Approach the witness, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about the emergency room and your entries and what occurred.
Eventually,
what was going on with your wife or not?
They were trying to find out contact information for our respective parents, and the only number I knew was my own parents. So I asked them so I remember asking the chaplain to call them, and also asking her if she would look. Jamie's father, Chris Kirk, had a photography website, and I remember telling her his number might be on there. Look there. But it was just a conversation about trying to get our parents to the hospital. They tended to my hands pretty quickly and eventually would put me in a private room. And there, the doctor came in, and or a resident came in and looked at my hands and started, I guess, stitching them up and tending to both my left and my right. And the whole time I kept on asking them for more information, but all they could tell me was that Jamie was in surgery. I remember the resident praying with me, and the chaplain too, because those were just very. And they asked me if I wanted to go into surgery that night, and I said no, not while Jamie's in surgery. Absolutely not. I just remember there were a couple of times where I was by myself in that room, and it was the loneliest feeling, because I knew that Jamie was being operated on, and my hands were stitched, but I couldn't. There was nowhere to go. There was no one around. But periodically, different people would come in: the chaplain, the surgical resident, nurses. I think they eventually gave me some sort of pain pills. I can't remember, or painkillers. I don't know when. Sometime that later on.
How long did you stay at the hospital?
I was, except for going, till Wednesday morning. I was being treated until sometime that night on Monday, and then they let me out. But I was there in the hospital till Wednesday. I went to go get medicine at one point. I went to a prayer vigil at one point, but otherwise I was at the hospital.
When did Jamie pass?
It's 1:53 a.m. on Wednesday, or something like that. I felt like she was going to make it. The chaplain had walked in and said, Jamie's still with us. And it was the happiest that I could ever remember feeling. And then the surgeon came in and said, she's still with us, and she's exceeding expectations, but she's touch and go, and the next 24 hours will tell the tale. But I just never gave up hope. Because we had had a conversation, because she'd gotten out of the house, because we had a conversation, I just believed, and when I left her, we said, I love you, and while she was complaining about her breathing, she was with us. And so, but finally the doctors told us that she wasn't, Jamie wasn't going to make it. And so we were with her in the hotel, in the hospital room, and sat there, and it was like a little bit before 2 a.m., I think.
Did Jamie ever respond to you or talk with you ever again?
No, I felt like her eyes were looking at me at points. Or at least I wanted to believe that, but no.
Your parents, her parents?
Yeah, family arrived, and then friends started arriving that Tuesday morning. But it was our respective parents were in the room with me and Jamie.
You didn't return back to your house?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
States Exhibit 47. Picture of the table in your kitchen. Can you tell us, do we have 47? State's Exhibit 47, can you, if you recognize any of these items on the table, can you tell us what we're looking at?
Stand. This was Jamie's iPad, and I know this was like some mail, and that was her notebook, and that was John's phone.
All right. There seems to be a jacket on the table, on the chair.
Yeah, that's my jacket.
That's your jacket?
Yeah, rain jacket.
Okay. Let me show you State's Exhibit 48 here. I'm holding this note on the right. Can you point it out on the table there?
Yes, that was a note that a friend had left saying thank you for your generosity and for letting us come down this weekend.
Okay. Did anybody spend the night with you Sunday night?
Yes, my friend Nick.
Okay.
That's a note from
Nick's
him.
Thank you note.
It is.
Left on the table.
It is.
This you identified.
Jamie's handwriting.
Yes, State's Exhibit 49.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the notebook? This is identified
That
as
was-
that notebook
yes.
being open now.
Yeah, that's Jamie's handwriting.
Okay. And on State's Exhibit 49, it says finalize all RBM outstandings.
Yes, it does.
Do you know what RBM means?
That stood for Brad Miller.
Okay. And let me show you State's Exhibit 46. It's referred to as maybe a post-it note. You can have some. State's Exhibit 46. Do you recognize whose handwriting this is on this?
That's Jamie's.
All right. Does that appear to say RBM at the
It
top of
does.
this?
It does.
And you've seen this exhibit before, haven't you?
I have.
Okay. Mr. Hunt, let me talk to you about you delayed your hand surgery.
Yes, sir.
Jamie's passed early Wednesday. Tell us about the reasons for delaying the hand surgery and when you actually had your hand surgery, what occurs in the days following, please.
I initially refused to have the hand surgery while Jamie was still in surgery, and then eventually while Jamie was in the hospital still with us, because I just didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't want to be away for any length of time. They told me I could wait a certain amount of days, maybe 7 to 10. The longer I waited, the more the risks were, but I could certainly wait, and that would be a safe amount of time to wait. But then with the funeral services with everyone in town, I didn't feel up for surgery, so we scheduled it for the day after the last memorial service, which was in Orangeburg. So that would have been on the following Tuesday. So I don't know what day that was, but
The 30th, maybe.
yeah.
You saw Dr. Ween.
Yeah, I saw Dr. Ween on the 24th or 25th. I can't remember exactly.
How are your hands while you're after the sutures in both your hands that evening on the 22nd? What are your hands looking like before you see Dr. Ween?
Both hands were bandaged.
Okay. And were your fingers exposed, or how significant are these bandages?
The left hand was far more significant than the right. I don't remember exactly how he had them wrapped, but I know that the left hand sort of went up the arm some and was much more substantive than the right was.
Tell us about after the surgery and I believe it's been mentioned maybe a prolonged course of therapy and maybe out of town and in town, and just the impact it had on you, your surgery as to your hand injuries.
I didn't want to return to the house, and I didn't have a place to stay. I mean, a lot of friends offered places to stay, so I shouldn't say I didn't have a place, but I wanted to go home to Lenore, where I'm from. And so I would go back and forth throughout the summer, spending some time here and some time in Lenore, more time in Lenore than not. And so I would occasionally see a physical therapist in Lenore. I think I may have gone to her. I went to her for the first visit immediately after my surgery, like 2 days later, to get some initial work done and some at-home supplies. I may saw her once or twice more, but I mostly went to Robin, who works at Dr. Ween's practice here in Cary.
Tell us about your day-to-day activities with your hands bandaged and before the surgery and after the surgery, and we've heard about various things you had to do. What were the limitations?
At some point, I can't remember exactly when it was, I think it was pre-surgery, but the right hand at least was freed up. The wounds had healed. The main concern after the surgery was that I would somehow re-injure the tendons because they were in a, as Dr. Wayne said, a very sort of fragile state. He was worried that they would, the way he described it when he dumbed it down for me was that the tendons could snap and recede. So basically go back into your hand in some form or fashion. That was the way I understood it. So I wasn't able to drive for some length of time, certainly not on the interstate, and really not at all for the first period, I don't know how long period of time. Then it was restricted to no interstate driving. And eventually that restriction would be lifted, but later on, maybe, I can't remember how much later. I couldn't really exercise because the main concern was if I fell, well, one, I couldn't work out my hands unless I just did the right. If I fell, the concern was that, again, the tendons would snap because they were re-healing and so on and so forth.
Were you seeing a therapist?
Physical therapist?
Yes.
Yes. I started seeing Robin. I would see Robin varying frequency. I mean, we tried to go at least twice a week for some period of time. Sometimes it wasn't possible because I'd be either in Lenore or I would be, wherever, but tried to see her about twice a week for some length of time. Eventually that would settle down to, it began to slow down as time went along.
It looks like Dr. Ween testified, I think your last visit with him was into September 9th, 2013. How often, how long did your rehab? Once or twice a week? I'm just trying to get a sense of.
Yeah, I mean, shortly thereafter, I can't remember if it was on that date or if it was a few weeks later, they sent me to at-home care. So basically they gave me like an exercise ball, a thing to wear over these two fingers. I'd had different, I had one cast that kept it like this, and then I had another cast that had hooks that would bend down, that would sort of keep my hand like this, keep my fingertips like this. So there were, at various points, I was switching in a different cast. I mean, at that point, I was cast free, and they just gave me a variety of home care stuff.
Okay. Jonathan Broyhill, authorization to use your Visa card that ends in 6064 to book an American Airlines flight to Vegas. The booking occurring right after early morning hours on Monday, April 22nd. Ticket?
Absolutely not.
I noticed, do you have a wedding ring on your left hand?
I do, sir.
Okay. What hand is it on?
Well, actually, it's on my right hand
Why is that?
because the scar tissue on my left hand won't allow it to slip over.
We're going to take a recess until 4 o'clock, and we'll resume at that time. Ladies and gentlemen, please recall the instructions. Don't talk among yourselves or with anyone else about the case. Don't form or express opinions about the outcome. no media or independent investigation into these matters. Please have no conversations with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. Leave your notepad. Gather in the deliberation room at 4 o'clock. Everyone else, please remain seated while the jurors excuse themselves. Anything we need to take up before we recess?
Not from the state.
We'll be in recess till 4 o'clock.
Superior Court stands in recess 4 o'clock.